The Met have apologised for not being able to respond quickly enough when pro-Palestinian protesters scaled a war memorial following Parliament's vote against a ceasefire in Gaza last night.
The footage shows, as you can see, flag-waving protesters climbing on the Royal Artillery Memorial at Hyde Park Corner, which was covered with poppy wreaths from Remembrance Weekend. But Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley says there wasn't anything illegal happening.
It is not illegal to climb onto a statue. I think that might be something that government may consider, but that's for them to decide, not for me. The officer recognised that whilst it wasn't illegal, it was sort of it was unfortunately inflammatory in certain ways. The officers at the scene asked them to get down, and they did.
Still with us in the studio now is the Sun's political columnist, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, we're also going to show you some footage in a little while of a Palestine mob trying to attack the cenotaph last night. So two of our most sacred war memorials last night were kind of under assault from more pro-Palestinian protesters. And all we ever get from the police, this is what we got every weekend, is we're just looking for clarification on the law. You and I were just talking to well-known former copper Peter Blexley, who just said, look, if a copper suspects that the law may be being broken, that there could be a breach of peace here, they can arrest. The police just don't seem to want to arrest these people who are attacking our sacred war memorials. What the hell is going on?
But the interesting thing about Sir Mark Rowley's comments there is that he actually gave the justification for an arrest, which was that this was inflammatory. In his words, yeah. Inflammatory surely is sufficient for a breach of the peace offence. Yeah. And a breach of the peace can be ideal for a quick action by police to deal with an incident on the ground without any need for other resources. You have to ask yourself how quickly the police would have acted if, instead of a Palestinian flag, someone had been waving the Union Jack.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that this is a very newfangled thing with the police. I don't think I've ever heard the head of the police before saying, oh, well, we don't know what the law is, or there's no law that exists that enables us to act. I mean, do you think the same? Is this some sort of recent development that's entered policing?
Yes, I'm afraid that in that short clip you've already shown, they have vindicated everything that Suella Braverman levelled at them in that article in the Times, that they are partisan, that they are deliberately soft-pedalling against particularly any large numbers, or from a political vantage point. So when it comes to Palestinians, they can do almost as they please and are only arrested if there's photographic evidence which can be pursued subsequently. When it comes to the EDL thugs, they're onto them straight away. In fact, they meet them halfway before they've even got beyond Hyde Park. Yeah. So there are two sides to this story, and Mark Rowley is clearly on one of them.
I think it was maybe last weekend, one weekend before, but there's been an absolute handful of arrests of pro-Palestinian marchers. I think one weekend, about 100,000 marched through London, 9 arrests. Last weekend, and we're not in any way supporting the EDL or anything like that, but they turn up, 126 arrests. I mean, there it is. There is a kind of favouritism.
Of course.
Yeah, well, joining us too is Andy No, who took some of that video, I think, of the protesters on the war memorials. I mean, you were an eyewitness. You've been very active, actually, going down to the protest, seeing what's going on, documenting it, and frankly, giving the world an eye on what's happening. What sort of things have you been witnessing?
I do observe what appears to be different types of policing responses depending on who is there to demonstrate. So the announcement to surround the Parliament was made through flyers, but still, when people came, they were able to shut down the streets in Westminster where the drivers were. And then as soon as they were done, then they were allowed, escorted by police throughout central London, where then they went on to confront some drivers. I witnessed somebody hitting a car, throwing items at people, an elderly couple within a car, and shutting down the iconic streets in central London, and then climbing on this this war memorial.
So you saw, you also, I think, filmed some people around the cenotaph. Let's have a look at some of your brilliantly filmed footage.
Where are your people? Wake up! One section each short.
Yeah, so Andy, there they are all trying to attack the cenotaph. The police, in fairness, at least nominally trying to stop them. In other scenes we've seen around the country, last night, in fact, we saw coppers just sort of standing there watching people climb all these statues. Quite extraordinary. And I've been to 3 of these demonstrations, and I must say, that they're full of hate for Israel, but they're not particularly menacing at the weekends. Yeah, 300,000 people on Saturday. I went to have a look at that. You don't feel frightened, but that looks a bit frightening around the cenotaph last night.
Well, we have now more than a month of these protests that have been happening, and what I'm observing is they are becoming a bit more entrenched and becoming essentially routine. It's happening not just on the weekends, but weekdays too. But some protesters are feeling emboldened to push a little bit further than what they could from the previous week or the week before. And I think it's important to point out that not everybody there is aggressive or violent, but there are some people who are taking advantage of the anarchy that's been allowed to become routine